I can remember when I first started in education, there were many schools that had no transportation that came to their school. They didn't have to worry about bus schedules, problems on the bus, etc., etc. But in the age of special education and the need to move students around, it's fairly rare that a school does not have bus transportation. And I think some of us think of it, at least I naively thought of it as a new principal. That wasn't really my problem, but that's not correct. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, in transportation, there's a whole new world, and transportation will generally drive the start of school because you're required to have, at a minimum, special education transportation. And most districts provide that along with general home-to-school transportation. The start and end times of schools are really dictated by how you could get transportation, how kids can be delivered to your campus and how soon, how big your fleet is, and so the number of routes you have. And so this becomes a driving factor for most people on what you could do with start and end times. In my district, it really drives the interplay between elementary and the junior high school campus. It has to be a certain number of minutes, and we cannot expand or contract those due to the fact that transportation cannot deliver the kids at the times needed. So we have a very narrow window that we can deliver our kids for the junior high and the elementaries, and so they're always tied together, and we constantly look at, when we're looking at bell schedules and transportation, whether transportation could be delivered or we can deliver the students at the time that is necessary. The things that I would say for transportation that you should look at as a principal are going to be, one, you have control, responsibility during loading and unloading. That's when you have a liability piece. But you also have, as a school site manager, outside of loading and unloading, you have the issue at school bus stops. You have the issue of control. You have the jurisdiction over there, and that is something you control. I have sent many principals out to school bus stops in order to control them, in order to take a look at what the problems are. It is not just a transportation problem. It really is a school site problem, even though many times principal would not want to look at it as their problem. They would like to say transportation. You own those students, whether they are on your campus, on a school bus, or at a school bus stop.
It really goes back to the concept that they belong to the school from the moment they leave home until they get home.
Exactly. I like to say this: you have jurisdiction, but no liability. You have jurisdiction over the students to control and make sure that they are acting appropriately, but you do not have the liability unless we are at a point of loading and unloading. So it's often surprising to principals that they have to control the students, whether it's a school bus stop or coming to school, that they have some kind of responsibility to do so. I think during transportation, what I always tell principals is, after 5 days, we have to have due process for students to be kicked off the school bus. That we can't have just a unilateral discretion of bus drivers eliminate transportation for a student for a whole semester.
So when you say after 5 days, they've been deprived for 5 days.
We can do a unilateral for up to 5 days, but that we say after that an administrator must have to have a hearing, conduct a hearing, and have due process rights for the student. And then the administrator ascribes the punishment, i.e., do we have more days than that of non-bus ridership? And so it really becomes a principal's responsibility and a site's responsibility for the conduct on the buses. And it's not to say that the school bus driver isn't there to help and to advise, but it really comes down to an administrator having to make the decision of what is the appropriate discipline for a student.
Can the bus driver say the kid can't be on the bus this afternoon or the next day?
The bus driver can issue those warnings and tickets. That's wholly appropriate. Many districts have those in their policies and procedures. I believe you cannot deprive a student through a bus driver unilaterally issuing discipline beyond, say, a 5-day suspension. It could be 10 days, whatever the school board deems, but you must have an administrator, in my mind, conduct a hearing and have some kind of evidence gathering and then issuing penalties and to the student.
What do you want to say to them about field trips and those kind of uses of transportation?
Field trips are great. I would tell a new administrator or anybody that do them early to make sure, one, that you can be accommodated. The biggest priority for any transportation department is going to be home to school transportation. So if you have something that is before school starts and delivers after school ends, you might not be able to accomplish that with the current schedule and how it goes. So the more lead time you can give your transportation department, the better information they can get back to you as to whether they could actually do the field trip or not. And many school districts have a anti-contracting out issue. And so whether some districts might have whether you can do the trip or not is dependent on your transportation department.
Sometimes we talk in administrative classes about the importance of building relationships. And one of the things I learned as a principal was I needed to develop a relationship with those bus drivers.
They could be your best friends.
So that we had a trust relationship that I would support them and they would support anything that I asked of the students and made them aware of. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Anytime you have the interaction between an administrator and a bus driver or another district employees and that they feel that they've been treated fairly and that they have a great relationship with the administrator, I think that goes a long way to make sure that, one, the overall success of a field trip will happen. The bus driver will be much more likely to want to make sure that everything is handled correctly because they don't want to disappoint an administrator. So I totally agree with that.
And
it's a relationship game.
The other thing I would say is, as a parent, I had a very bad relationship with a bus driver. And I think also what a principal needs to know, if those kind of issues come up, the person they go to is the head of transportation and or the assistant sup for business. Absolutely.
In my school district, we have cameras on our bus, so we can look at individual problems that happen with the students. And so that goes a long way to do so, but if there's something that can't be worked out with the transportation department, that I tell my administrators that I'm always available to help and to listen. And so I will review footage and see, and I would also have the footage reviewed by the administrator. And so I think those go a long way to alleviating a parent's concern. One, if an administrator can say, I viewed this and I did not see this happen. Or I saw something and I'm going to get back to you and we conduct an investigation and go from that angle. But I think it's always better to be able to be upfront with parents and doing so, and to be able to come to me.
Well, the message is transportation is part of your life as a school administrator.
Yes.